Hi, my name is Juliana Bacó Padilla and my partner is María Hernández. We are going to talk about one of the most concerning social problems that Puerto Rico is facing since many years ago, but lately its incidents are getting out of control and increasing. Specifically, we chose to talk about domestic violence in Puerto Rican women. The objectives for this presentation are: first of all, give background information about domestic violence and about Puerto Rico for a better understanding of the presentation. Meet the laws in Puerto Rico that protect women and men from domestic violence. Analyze some statistics and facts about domestic violence in Puerto Rico. See how Puerto Ricans react to domestic violence through protests, campaigns, and others. Discuss possible solutions that will help to reduce incidents of domestic violence in Puerto Rican women. And finally, explain and discuss the solution we concluded that is the best way to confront this issue. Before moving forward in the topic, it's important to talk about domestic violence because numbers of incidents have caused great attention to the topic. It affects a vast part of the population. It grows in silence because its victims feel threatened and intimidated by their aggressors and afraid to speak out their situation. People need to be informed about the situation. Countries that do recognize domestic violence as a crime frequently have cultures of impunity, which make the enforcement of laws and protections much more difficult. As said before, the focus for this presentation will be on the incidence of domestic violence in Puerto Rican women, the law enforcement, the reaction of Puerto Ricans, and discuss possible solutions and the best for this issue. The term domestic violence is defined as a violent or aggressive behavior within a household. Domestic violence affects a large group of people, which includes elderly, children, and same-sex couples. Intimate partner violence is a violence by a spouse or partner in an intimate relationship against the other spouse or partner. Domestic violence can take place in heterosexual and same-sex family relationships and can involve violence against children in the family or, in some U.S. states, violence against a roommate. Domestic violence is a social problem that many countries endure. The cycle of abuse. To recognize the behavior of the offender, it is important to know and understand the cycle of abuse. This diagram shows the cycle of domestic violence in a relationship that usually starts with verbal and emotional abuse and later with physical and or sexual abuse. The first stage consists in the tension between the couple, and the victims start to feel afraid. In the second stage, the aggression and abuse starts. In the third stage, abuser starts to apologize and acts as if the abuse was not a big deal. In the final stage, the honeymoon phase, the couple, or at least the abuser, acts like nothing had happened. The power and control wheel. To recognize the behavior of the offender, it is important to know the types of violence that can happen. The power and control wheel shows the typical behaviors that abusers use to get the control and power in the relationship, like threats, intimidation, emotional and economic abuse, male privilege, isolation, blame and denial, and the use of children. As many of us know, Puerto Rico is a small island, insular territory of the United States, which has around 3 million citizens. Even though Puerto Rico is a small island, It suffers one of the world's worst rates of intimate partner violence, with more than 20,000 cases of domestic violence reported each year. Its victims are mainly women. It is estimated that 60% of married women are victims of spousal abuse, and 97% of victims of domestic violence are women. Some scholars estimate that more than half of the world's women experience violence in intimate relationships. Reasons of domestic violence in Puerto Rico are because Puerto Rico has high rates of inequality. According to the draft Human Development Report 2016 Puerto Rico, which was made by a team of 35 professionals, the island is one of the jurisdictions worldwide with greater inequality, where mainly women endure these inequalities. It has yet to overcome several obstacles like economic, social, and cultural. According to Rohr, a culture of male dominance and patriarchy in Puerto Rico plays a major role in the underreporting of domestic violence by female victims. It has also been discovered that in some regions of the island, women are held as subordinates with organized religions. The obstacles limit the eradication of violence and discrimination against women. There is a lack of fundings for women's rights policies. Also, there is a weak law enforcement. Few women in violent relationships are seeking protection, perhaps in large part because they distrust the system. Women fear their aggressors, and the system is failing to grant adequate protection to victims. There are some laws in Puerto Rico that protect women and men from domestic violence. The most known is the Law 54, Ley para la Prevención e Intervención con la Violencia Doméstica. It was created to establish a set of measures to prevent and combat domestic violence in Puerto Rico. It involves any offenses of abuse, aggravated abuse, abuse by threats, abuse by restricting freedom, and spousal sexual assault. It empowers courts to issue protective orders for victims of domestic violence. The law provides remedies such as protection order, which are legal remedies to protect people facing domestic violence. To request this resource is not necessary to file criminal charges. The Law 226, para crear un programa piloto que establezca un protocolo para atender víctimas de violencia doméstica. This measure proposes to establish a pilot program aimed specifically to start and develop a medical protocol to assist victims of domestic violence. Law 217, Protocolo para manejar situaciones de violencia doméstica en el lugar de trabajo. This law recognizes that there are cases of domestic violence in workplaces. It requires the employers from the public and private sectors to establish a protocol to manage those cases of domestic violence in the workplace. As additional information, the Law 275, better known as Ley de Armas, was amended to include, among people not allowed to own a firearm, those that have committed offenses of domestic violence.
The Police Department of Puerto Rico provides recent and exclusive information on some of their cases on domestic violence from over 13 cities on the island. After analyzing the chart provided in their page, it was found that 82.9% of the victims are females, leaving males with a 17.1%. This percent is similar to the one given by Rower's paper from 2011, which informs that women are more likely to be affected with this issue from a 83% to a 90%. On a side note, the city with the highest rate of domestic violence, both for males and females, is in Bayamón, Puerto Rico. It is important to know the statistics to understand the consequences of domestic violence against women specifically. In a 2003 study, Puerto Rico was found to have the sixth highest rate of femicide per 1 million among 14 countries in the Americas, and it was also found to have the seventh highest rate worldwide. In 1995 to 1996, the same study examined the rates of femicides committed by partners or ex-partners, and it was found that 13% of women were going through this physical assault. All this information was found on Rory's paper. It was also noted that in 2003, a woman was killed on an average of every 15 days. Going through these statistics, we can deduce that women often do not feel safe in their own homes, given that in 2001 to 2008, 178 women were murdered by their partners or ex-partners, where 55% of them occurred in the victim's own home. It is also important to note that the average age of the domestic violence aggressor was from 40 years. 50% of the aggressors were between the ages of 20 and 39 years old. Unfortunately, these statistics do not mean domestic violence is not prevalent among the youth in Puerto Rico. It may not be common, but it also occurs. In 36% of those cases of femicide, the aggressor committed suicide. This fact is very important to highlight because it reflects the lack of preventative measures and other resources available to perpetrators of domestic violence. When more than 1/3 of such crimes result in the aggressors committing suicide, preventative measures are highly necessary. This colossal issue has huge impact on the Puerto Rican citizens. This is why we wanted to share how the people from the island take action to create awareness to this matter. Here we can see a group of women dressed as brides marching. This is done in memory of Gladys Ricard, who was murdered by her former boyfriend during the day of her wedding. Puerto Ricans marched dressed as brides to draw attention to the society on violence against women and the need for equality. A group of Puerto Ricans created an institution named Casa Julia. This foundation, that takes name after the first pioneer of the feminist movement in Puerto Rico, has a vision to provide shelter, protection, and support to women survivors of domestic violence, as well as their children. It promotes and encourages autonomy and self-sufficiency of its participants. It was established since 1979, and it continues helping women to this day. In this slide, we can appreciate an image of how women from the Feminist Coalition raised awareness after painting a mural against intimate partner violence. After going through the background information, the statistics, and all that was said before, we decided to create a list of possible solutions to stop or decrease the incidence of domestic violence. The first solution was to establish campaigns around the country against domestic violence, which brings support especially to the Puerto Rican women. Through those campaigns, Puerto Rican women will feel supported and more confident to talk about their situation of abuse. This is a real issue that many fear to open up about. This way, besides the support given in these campaigns, they also will help them to deal and resolve their cases of domestic violence or any abuse, and can feel open to go and find help. The second solution is that every community in Puerto Rico should have a plan of action if they suspect or witness any domestic aggression in their community. By establishing plan of actions in such communities, especially in those with more incidents of domestic violence in Puerto Rico, such as in Bayamon, the incidents can be avoided because this plan will require a support group within each community where the inhabitants of the neighborhood can inform the authorities about any suspect or sign of assault in their community. It can also provide service from psychologists and counselors. The third solution is to educate the young citizens about domestic violence by giving orientations at school. Doing so, we can raise awareness at an early age about domestic violence being a serious social problem that currently affects many women in Puerto Rico, and also to make clear that aggression is never a solution. With this, they can be more aware and open about these situations that can undergo in their own households. The fourth solution is to increase fundings of domestic violence programs that supports Puerto Rican women from the U.S. federal government that are orientated towards the prevention of said issue. It's very important that this kind of programs that battle against this issue in women have a good budget to provide the necessary services for the victims seeking support. Advocates blame the situation on inadequate funding for women's rights policies and weak political support for implementing the law. They direct particular criticism at the Office of the Women's Advocate, formed in 2001 to establish public policies with a gender perspective. The annual budget is now $6,769,000, down from $8,141,000 in 2009. Puerto Rico received most of its funding for domestic violence programs from the U.S. federal government as a result of its political status. Hence, the fact that such programs are underfunded is not surprising, since the United States has historically underfunded domestic violence projects in general. That is why we choose the fourth solution, which is to increase fundings of domestic violence programs that supports Puerto Rican women. Here we can see the sources that we use to develop and create this presentation. As to conclude this presentation, we can agree that we have presented what domestic violence is. We also created an understanding of the social problem of domestic violence in women of Puerto Rico, the reasons of and the consequences encountered with the data, and a discussion of possible solutions to this issue. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you.